going to have a chat about what a pelvic floor is and how to know if you're contracting it properly. And I'm going to look while I'm talking to you. I've got my screen open and I can see the slides that I'm going to put in here. I'm hoping not to turn into one of those physios on TikTok that does all the jazzy, all this stuff, because that's not really me. Nor, as you can see, is tidying up, that I'm still in the process of trying to create some space to do some work from home, but really all I'm doing is shuffling crap around, so ignore all of that, just pay attention to what the content is going to be. So, pelvic floor. This is a model. It is not somebody that's annoyed me and I've done a mischief to. And you can see the shape of your pelvis, right? You know that, you've seen that in Halloween things. And these blue bits are ligaments. There's lots and lots of ligaments. They're not all shown on this model, but the purpose of the ligaments is to try and hold all of this steady, because you don't want the three bones in your pelvis moving around. So you've got one on the side, one on the other side, and then your sacrum at the bottom with your tailbone hanging off the bottom of that, your coccyx. And the idea is that there's no movement at these joints, because if this is rolling around, so if when you're walking, your pelvis is moving up and down, it's really, really painful and it affects your mobility, which you'll see commonly in women who are pregnant and they've got pelvic girdle pain, because the effect of the pregnancy hormones is it makes these joints move, and these women are not happy. It's very, very sore. If you have that, by the way, physio can help. Anyway, I've got a bit of a cough, sorry. Oh dear. That was a demonstration of pelvic floor in action. In action, not inaction. I'm all right. So the red bits are muscles, the blue bits are ligaments, and the pink bits should be vaguely familiar because you're either sitting in a vulva or you maybe came out of one and had a wee look and the way by. So when you see it, it makes sense, right? Your pelvic floor provides a floor for your pelvis. This isn't rocket science. So the job of your pelvic floor becomes apparent, because obviously with that being there, it's going to hold all your guts up, right? So its job is to support all of the organs that sit in your pelvic space. And they do this in a really interesting way. They're a bit different from your average muscle in your body. That's partly because most muscles attach from bone to bone. And so if you think about your arm, your biceps is attaching from your shoulder to your elbows. So if that contracts, this moves, right? But in your pelvic floor, there's not movement. I've just told you that you want this to be solid. There's not really anywhere for them to pull together. Their action is to squeeze and lift. And part of the way that they do that is because they're not just attaching bone to bone, but they're attaching onto ligaments. So the whole thing is covered by these muscles. And that's important because ligaments are affected by a number of other things that bones aren't. So women that have got connective tissue disorders, so if you're hyperflexible, if you've got Ehlers-Danlos, then these ligaments are going to be more bendy than they are in a woman who isn't hypermobile. So your pelvic floor is having to work harder because this has got more movement, so it has to work a bit harder to do its job. And similarly with aging. So once you're menopausal and your ovaries are no longer producing estrogen, that affects all your soft tissues. So it affects the way that your ligaments work. That's why we can get joint pain, because the ligaments aren't supporting your joints as well as they did when you were still, suffused with estrogen. So think of your pelvic floor muscles as a hammock, right? They're a hammock that's going from the back of I'll just show you. They're going from the sacrum at the back and they're coming all the way underneath and they're attaching onto the front. And in that hammock is sitting your bladder at the front, your uterus in the middle, and your vagina, assuming you've still got a uterus, and your rectum at the back. And your pelvic floor is supporting each of those. I've got a wee slide. I should do it like this. I've got a wee slide. Tell you, amateur. There's also in the pelvic floor muscles gristle. So these muscles are really, really strong because they have got a higher than average percentage of just like thick tissue that doesn't stretch. It goes between the layers of the muscle. There's 3 layers of muscle, they're quite big. And that gristle stuff also extends in the pelvic bowl so that you've got sheets of it coming up the way to hold your bladder at the front, your vagina and your uterus if you've still got it, and your rectum at the back. They hold them in place. As well as that, there's also nerves and organs. So where these holes are, I haven't explained that yet, I'll do it in a minute. Where these holes are, actually I'll do it this way around. Can you see? There's a hole there for your vagina and your urethra, and that's for your bum hole. But there's also these holes at the side, and those are so that the nerves that come out from your sacrum are going to go through there to get down your leg. There's a couple of tricky bits that they've got to go through. See, it doesn't show it that well in this model, but can you see there's a ligament there and there's another one underneath it? So the nerve comes out this hole, and your sciatic nerve's as thick as your pinky, like it's a big structure. So it comes out there, and then some of the nerves go through that little hole, and there's also blood vessels go in there. So sometimes things can get a bit snarled up with the journey that the different structures have to go through. That is sometimes an issue for women that are pregnant, they're in labour, they're delivering a baby vaginally, and the second stage of labour, so the pushing stage, is just really slow. It's taking the baby's head a long time to come from being up in her abdomen to being down into her pelvis and then actually down through the birth canal. So the size of the baby's head can press against where all of these nerves and blood vessels are, and it can cause injuries. As well as that, so your pelvic floor at the bottom, and its job, I forgot that bit. So the job of your pelvic floor is to squeeze and lift, right? That's what it does. We'll talk about that a wee bit more in a minute, but that explains why you've got these holes here, right? You can see it really well on this muscle that goes round in a circle around your anus. So if you're going to fart and you don't want to fart, you can see that if you contract that muscle, it's going to squeeze and it'll hold your bum hole shut, and then you're not going to fart, right? Ideal, handy. And the same's true of the muscles that support your pee hole and the weight of your bladder. You should have quite good control of both of these muscles. You should be able to make them go on and then off. So when you squeeze and lift, you're going to go like this and then relax. We'll talk about that a wee bit more. So abdominal muscles, so the muscles in the front of your tummy, they work with your pelvic floor. So if you think about the one where a man's got a six-pack, if you're lucky enough to have ever seen one of those in the wild and you're interested in men's bodies, then it can be quite mesmerising. And those muscles attach along the front of here on the bone. So they work really closely. If you look here, so there's where your pelvic floor muscles attach, and abdominal muscles are right there. So they don't join, but they're right next door to each other. So if you get a good strong contraction of your pelvic floor, you can feel it often coming right across the bottom of your tummy. You might feel a tightening right here across the very bottom bit of your abdominal muscles. And that's on purpose because these two structures work together as part of your core. Now, core control is something that gets spoken a lot. If you've done Pilates or yoga, you'll know about core control, but it's really fundamental for movement. If you don't have control of the middle bit of you, then it's really difficult to be able to reach for something out of your kitchen cupboard, because this is all wobbling about, so it's hard to get your hand to go where you need it to go. Core control is really important, and one of its jobs is to control the pressure that's inside your abdomen. So if you laugh or cough or sneeze like I did, then there's a spike of pressure in your tummy that pushes down into your pelvis, and your pelvic floor muscles should contract to support your bladder, otherwise your bladder's getting pushed and it's going to leak. So that's why lots of women wet themselves a little bit if they laugh or cough or sneeze, because those muscles are either not strong enough to resist the force or they're not coordinated enough to kick in when you need it. There's other bits in your core. So you've got your pelvic floor at the bottom, abdominals at the front, and at the top you've got your diaphragm. Now, your diaphragm is a big sheet of muscle, and part of its job is to help the air get in and out of your lungs. So when you take a deep breath, your rib cage opens, and can you feel that affects what's going on in your tummy, because the big muscle underneath your rib cage pushes down so that there's space for your lungs to fill. Now that affects your pelvic floor. So it pushes down and your pelvic floor muscles go with it. So it works a bit like a sump pump. Your pelvic floor is not fixed. When it relaxes, it goes down, and one of the things that can help it relax is your diaphragm pushing it down. They go like that. Does that make sense? The other bit is you've got some long muscles in your spine at the back. So you've got your abdominals at the front, long muscles at the back, your diaphragm at the top, your pelvic floor at the bottom, and that is what your core is. And it should be really strong, and it should all coordinate itself so that it's just quietly, dealing with the forces that you're generating by what you're doing with your day-to-day life. If all the 4 factors of it are working well, then it is really strong. But if one of them fail, then it becomes inefficient and you're more likely to leak. So your pelvic floor is not fixed. It moves up and down, and breathing really matters. So when you take a deep breath in, then your pelvic floor is going to descend, and that becomes important when we talk about non-relaxing pelvic floors. So your role of your pelvic floor is to be able to squeeze to hold your holes shut so that you can control your fart, to relax so that you can let pee out and poo out. A non-relaxing pelvic floor, sometimes that's a bit tricky. It acts as a sump pump, so it's acting as a pump so that it helps with getting blood from your legs back up into your torso, back up in the way to your heart. And also if you've got swollen ankles, like, it can be really helpful for trying to shift that extra fluid back up to where your kidneys are. It's important for your balance and for your ability to do things, because it will help keep this bit of you still, and it's really important for your sexual function. So an orgasm is in part a flickering contraction of your pelvic floor. If these muscles aren't, I'll do it the other way. If these muscles are stronger, then you're going to get a better quality of orgasm. If they're stronger and they're well coordinated, you're going to get a really good orgasm. And I think that we should talk a lot more about that as physios, because sex is part of being an adult, and it's motivating, right? Remembering to do your pelvic floor exercises can be really hard. So if we tell you, well, there might be a payoff, then you're more likely to remember to do it. So your pelvic floor is really important for your whole life. So as soon as you're potty trained and you're continent, it is going to work to do these jobs for you until you die. It doesn't really get a day off. One of the things that women say commonly is that they're not sure how to do a pelvic floor contraction. And it makes sense, because if you're trying to fix your bingo wings, you usually know what your arm is. And you usually know what your arm does. You understand that if you've got a weight and you're bending and straightening your arm, that's going to change the muscle, and then that's going to change its appearance, and that's your objective. But with your pelvic floor, it can be really tricky to know if you're doing the contraction properly. So let's have a chat. The action I told you is like a squeeze and a lift, and both parts of the action of the muscle are really important. The reason for that is because you need it to be able to squeeze to hold your holes shut, but also to lift to support the organs. So all of this, this is heavy. The stuff that these muscles are resisting are physically heavy. The forces that they're resisting can be quite powerful. That's why there's lots of gristle in here to help them. Lots of women can do a squeeze, but they don't have the lift bit, and that's weakness. Lots of women can do a squeeze, but they can't hold it for very long. And we want you to be able to hold it for about a count of 10 seconds. Because if you can squeeze your pelvic floor for 10, it can reduce the urge to pee. So when you're bursting, but the bus you're not anywhere near your bus stop, you're quite a distance from home, there's nowhere to go, you're going to have to hang on. If you can do a really strong pelvic floor contraction, it can reduce the urge, so it'll buy you a bit more time until you can get to the toilet. And that sense kicks in at about 10 seconds of a squeeze. However, lots of women can do a squeeze and it feels like they're sure that they're doing a squeeze, but then it gradually eases off and eases off. So when they count to 10 and they let go, they don't feel any different because the muscles are already relaxed. So that's a sign of weakness. Also, sometimes women can do a contraction, but the muscle's already been half on because it's a bit tight. So they do a little contraction, and then when they let go, it's not got far to go because it's only working in this range. So what you're looking for is a squeeze and a lift. Think about when you're doing it. I'll talk you through it, and I want you to really pay attention to what you're actually feeling, whether you can feel a squeeze, whether you can feel a lift up the way. It's a small movement, it's not massive, and whether you can feel a drop. There's 3 things to pay attention to. There's tricks that you can use to visualize it. One that I like is imagine that your pelvic floor is a jellyfish and it's just bobbing through the water like this. Sometimes women can get a good contraction if they have a straw and actually suck something, milkshake up through the straw. Other women get a good visualization if they imagine that they've got a straw in their vagina and they're trying to suck milkshake up into their vagina. Lots of these things, like, don't overthink it. Don't go wondering, why have I got a jellyfish in my pants? What is she saying about the straw? Like, it's just prompts, right? Also, imagine that you're sitting on a blueberry, although I like Maltesers, so I say Maltesers, and you're going to pick that up with your vagina. So there's lots and lots of cues that you can use to try and get the feeling of the squeezing. These are common ones. Other ones that work are, imagine that you've got a zip fitted. So you've got a zip from the front going all the way underneath to your bum hole, and you're going to zip it up. Imagine that you're lifting your spectacles. So lift your spectacles. No, I've done that wrong. Scrub all that. Lift your testicles to your spectacles. So imagine that you have testicles and you're lifting them from down up to your spectacles. It's an amazing command because it actually works whether you have testicles or spectacles or none. For some women, not for everybody. You might go, what is she talking about? Which I wouldn't blame you, that was very garbled. Lift your testicles to your spectacles. I like one that I came up with to help a lady of, in Toy Story, that bit where Buzz Lightyear is trapped in the arcade machine with a claw? Right, so imagine that your vagina is the claw and it's coming down and it's going to grab Buzz by his head and then it's going to lift him up at that sort of speed, right? And you've got a buzz in your bum. Anyway, there was some research done into seeing which command gets the best pelvic floor contraction, and it is, for the most people, getting the best quality of contraction was imagine you're holding in a fart. Because everybody knows what that means, right? Everybody has been in a situation where holding in a fart is really a necessity. You cannot fart. Wherever you are, you have to hold it in. So you're going to hold in your fart and you're going to squeeze for a count of 10, but you're really squeezing. Imagine that you're in a lift with your boss and your secret crush and your mother-in-law, right? People that you do not want to have a big old rattly fart in front of, especially when they can't escape, because you know what you ate last night and it wasn't pretty. Like, this is not going to be a cute fart. This is like toxic waste. It's not nice. So that feeling of you squeezing, like, the more I tell you about how awful it is, the harder you squeeze, and you should feel your bum hole lift up a little bit. It's a small movement, so you're going to squeeze and lift. There you go. That's you doing your pelvic floor contraction. Now, lots of women wonder if they're doing it correctly, if they can only feel it at the back. And if you Google it, there's lots and lots of opinions out there and lots of different prompts about, imagine that your vagina's a clock and you're squeezing at 12 o'clock or 9 o'clock or 6 o'clock. I don't think it matters, because the muscles all have the same nerve and they all do the same thing. So if you've got in your head squeeze and lift, and you can feel something working somewhere, then that's a muscle contraction. If you're more likely to feel it at the back because there's more nerve endings there than there is at the front. But as long as you're feeling something squeeze, then keep going with it, and eventually as you're stronger you'll be able to differentiate between squeezing at the front or the back. If you can't feel it, there's a couple of things you can try to help. Having a look in a mirror is really good, because when you look at your vulva and you do a squeeze and lift of your bum hole, this shifts, it changes slightly. You might see your bum hole lift up, and you might see this sort of contract ever so slightly round, not your vagina, but the skin around your vulva should move. Just be careful where you do that, like I'm using light from a window. Just if you get a torch, right, put a table lamp so you can see what you're doing. Don't put your fanny at your window in case your neighbours are there. It does work, like your vagina winks at you. Other things that can help are midstream stops. So we talk about that quite a lot. We used to teach women to stop the flow of pee when they were on the toilet as an exercise. And you should be able to do that. That's a sign of a good pelvic floor. However, there's some concern that if you keep doing that, you cause some backflow of the pee back up into your bladder, and it might be linked with urinary tract infections. So now we want you to do that just as a test. Like, see if you can do it. Can you slow the flow of pee, or can you actually stop it? And then recheck it in a month's time and see if there's a difference or not. But don't do it regularly as an exercise, because they think it's linked with urinary tract infections. I'm repeating myself. Okay, so shall we have a wee go? So you're going to start off with an inhale, and then you're going to exhale. And you know why, don't you? Because when you take a deep breath, your diaphragm descends down and your pelvic floor goes with it. If you try and squeeze and lift on an inhale, then you're working against that pressure. So if you sigh out, then your diaphragm's going up and your pelvic floor's going with it, and it's much easier to do than this. Okay, so you ready? Take a deep breath in, and then sigh out, and then you're going to squeeze and lift your bum hole, and you're going to hold that for 10, 9, 8, 7, keep breathing. You've got to keep breathing while you're doing it, that's the tricky bit, and then relax. And what you should feel is something going when you let go. If nothing happens, if you stop squeezing and you don't feel anything in your pelvic floor, then it's probably lost power. So keep an eye on that, and as you do the exercises, it should strengthen. Normal is being able to be on and then off. You can always feel it, let go. So that's the first exercise, a long hold for a count of 10. Now, that's really useful. It will help you, as I said, if you're on a bus or if there's a queue or for whatever reason you can't get to the toilet immediately. But it won't help you if you laugh or cough or sneeze, because that contraction is different. It's a quick, sharp on and then off. I always think it's a bit like, if you've got a baby, like, 7, 8 months, 10 months, and you've got an ice cream and the baby's starting to get interested in food, and you go to eat your ice cream and the baby's hand is there, like, it's so fast. That's what you're trying to do, but with your pelvic floor. So it's like a quick contraction. Think about a Venus flytrap shutting to catch a fly. Hopefully you don't have flies in your fanny. That'd be really awful, actually, if I'm saying that. And it turns out that you do. It's not ideal. Anyway, so that's your visualization. So it's going to go like this. Okay, you're going to squeeze and lift and relax. So you're going to go 1, 2, 3, and at this sort of speed, if you can. I've lost count. But I've got my slide, right, that's doing the counters. Now, when you're at ninja level, you can do this without doing your eyebrows at the same time. Nobody knows why your eyebrows go Nobody knows. There's not been any proper research done into this, but I can't find an anatomical link between your pelvic floor and your forehead, so who knows? It doesn't matter. It's just, you know, if your eyebrows go, if you find it easier to do it with your eyebrows as if they're tugging it up, then that's totally fine. It just means that people know you're doing it if you're in the supermarket queue. I get that, because I've been, you know, talking about this for quite some time, and every now and then I see some woman looking at me and I see her doing that and I think, oh, you heard something I said one time. So you got that. A long slow contraction for a count of 10 and then 10 quick flicks. And you're going to do that 3 times a day, every day until you're dry, and then once a day, every day until you die. And the way to remember it is, we won't pee with a 10, 10, 3, right? Hold for a count of 10, 10 quick flicks, 3 times a day. It's not that difficult, is it? It's also useful. There's a thing called the knack, which is when you do a really strong pelvic floor contraction before you do something that you know will make you leak if you've got incontinence. So if you can feel a sneeze coming, if you can actively contract your pelvic floor to try and give it a bit of an extra nudge to kick in, often that can be really, really helpful. Also things like emptying the washing machine or lifting a baby into the back of the car seat. You know, car seats are really tricky. So think about your pelvic floor and do the knack beforehand. The changes in your pelvic floor take a while. Okay, so the evidence is that if women have got stress incontinence, the common one where you laugh and cough and sneeze and wet yourself, if women do these exercises 3 times a day for 3 months, then 3/4 of them will get dry, which is the thinking behind Dry by Christmas, right? We start on the 24th of September and I'll nag you on Twitter to remember your pelvic floor exercises. 3 months' time is the 24th of December, so that gives you time to see if it works. Maybe you're one of the 75%, and if you're not, if it doesn't work, then you know that you've tried it, and when you go to seek help, then that's information that you can give them, and we'll have a look and figure out why. Because, you know, it doesn't work for everybody. Conservative treatment doesn't work for everybody, but the majority of us actually probably don't even need an assessment. If you can diagnose yourself and try the exercises and crack on with your life, that's a good thing. It's really difficult, though, to remember to do pelvic floor exercises. It's really hard because, for a start, they're boring. They are so dull. Sorry to all the pelvic floor aficionados out there, enthusiasts. They're really repetitive, and the early stages of this sort of thing, like, they don't really progress. It's just a lot of squeezing and I'll have to do them again. It's a bit of a chore. So put some things into your life so that you can remember, because, you know, it might be all that you need. If you can make it into a habit, that's great. Smartphones are great because you can just set alarms so that, you know, it reminds you. There's apps that you can get. There's make it into habit. Some women do it every time they boil the kettle. Working from home has been great for that, actually, because people drink a lot more tea, although we'll talk about that in bladders. Sometimes it's a bit counterproductive if they're sensitive to caffeine. So something that you're doing a lot. In the olden days, before we had tech nudges, we used to give women stickers. You get a little red dot and put it on your light switch or onto, you know, something that you saw a lot, onto your car keys, so that every time you see a red dot, you think about your pelvic floor. It doesn't matter. Like, it actually doesn't matter. Women are busy, and anything you can do to put it into your head to do your pelvic floor exercises is perfectly useful. Follow me on Twitter and I'll nag you. I'm at Gussie Grips. And also, although the evidence is saying, like, you know, 3 times a day minimum, clinically, I'm not convinced by that, because it is hard to remember. So we know that some women are doing it, you know, 3 times a day diligently for 3 or 4 days, and then they forget for a couple of days, and then they do it once for a couple of days, and then they go back to 3 times a day for a couple of days, and it's a bit inconsistent. They still get better. So don't beat yourself up if you're not completely diligent with doing it 3 times a day, every day until you're dry, and then once a day, every day until you die. Something is better than nothing. That's the adage for muscle strengthening. Now, if it doesn't work, so if you do this, you do your breathe in, sigh out, squeeze and lift your bum hole for a count of 10, relax, And then you're going to do 10 quick flicks like this, 10 in a row. You do that 3 times a day for 3 months and it doesn't help. Or if you do them, you do your long slow squeezes and you do your quick flicks and they are painful or you're not sure what you're doing, then we want you to come into clinic. Please don't put up with it. The women that the 75% with stress incontinence that this doesn't work for, or the women who have got like an overactive bladder or prolapse or many other different types of presentations that we see, this might not be enough. So if it turns out that you're one of those, that's fine. We want you to come into clinic. Although we will talk about overactive bladders and overactive pelvic floors and whatnot later. But this video is half an hour long, so that's already far, far too long for social media. 3 minutes apparently is the max. 30 on TikTok, 30-second video is too long. I mean, who can, there's so much to say. So that's it. We won't pee with the 10-10-3. The purpose is to squeeze and lift your bum hole. Give it a shot. Let me know what you think. Oh, and dry by Christmas.